Are you digging up the dirt on your dead? Want to find out how? Hear the latest on new family history sources and websites with interesting and fun guests and experts. Find out what other people have been learning about their ancestors. From kings to thieves, inventors to farmers, nothing that's been discovered should surprise us anymore, but it always does. Find out what we mean. Great family history stories and information are on the way now with Extreme Genes, Family History Radio, and extremegenes.com.
It's been this way for generations.
Extreme Genes, Extreme Genes. Dates in the Bible don't quite match the marriage certificate. Extreme Genes, Extreme Genes. Uh-oh.
Hello, Genies, and welcome back to Extreme Genes Family History Radio, America's family history show. Hi, I'm Fisher, your radio root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. Well, all through July, we're celebrating our first anniversary, and we thank you so much for spreading the word about the show, liking us on Facebook, and participating in all the ways you do. If you have a story or question you'd like to run by us, feel free to call us toll-free at 1-234-56-GENES. That's 1-234-56-GENES, G-E-N-E-S. Or, of course, you can Facebook us or simply email me at fisher@extremegenes.com. Well, it's funny how it sometimes works out. You start running across people with similar information to share. Sometimes it's about DNA. Other times it's about soldiers. Well, this week we wound up with two guests who have assembled two really interesting and entertaining lists. First, in about 8 minutes, Tom Kelleher joins us to talk about common myths about old times. Myths about people's sizes, death by fire, death period. You will enjoy hearing what Tom has to say. Then later in the show, Minnesota's Erica Vetch joins us with her list of 5 fascinating facts about early photography. You cannot imagine how different photography then was, not only from now, but from how we imagined it was. From clamps and hidden parents to exploding studios. Wait till you hear what Erica has to share. It's all good stuff. We got a great email from Leslie Pace in Bristol, Rhode Island. She says, Fisher, I had no idea there were so many wars before the Revolution. I learned that my 8th great-grandfather was wounded not far from here in the Great Swamp Fight in 1675 in the King Philip's War. Thanks for the info. Glad to help Leslie, and if you missed David Allen Lambert's visit last week on colonial wars, give him a listen on our podcast. You can download the free podcast app to your iPhone or Android to always be up to date on our latest shows. This week's survey on extremegenes.com was about heirlooms and the oldest ones in your possession. 44% of you said your oldest heirloom was between 101 and 150 years old. 36% said more than 150, and 20% said 50 to 100 years. That is a lot of old stuff, and I hope you're digitizing and photographing those items to share online. This week's poll has to do with a family sports tradition. Does your family have a team that you have followed for more than 3 generations? In our family, the answer is yes, 5. I'm not going to tell you which team because, well, they're terrible, and I'm really struggling to end that tradition. It's difficult. Vote now at extremegenes.com. From the pages of extremegenes.com, it is time once again for your Family Histoire news. Of course, the big news this week is the start of another season of Who Do You Think You Are on TLC. Sex and the City star Cynthia Nixon was featured in the first episode. It was quite the adventure as she discovered, just as we talked about in recent weeks, that she too had an ancestor in prison. But it wasn't a man. It was her great-great-grandmother. Yes, Martha Kernut was only the second woman ever in the Missouri State Penitentiary. And she was there, separately, of course, with some 800 guys. I won't spoil the whole thing for you, just in case you're going back to check it out. DNA testing is in play again down in Texas. David Parker is an Indiana native who grew up hearing that there had once been a Native American in his family. He later learned that person may well have been Quanah Parker, the last of the Comanche chiefs, and a fierce one at that. Back in 1836, a 9-year-old girl named Cynthia Ann Parker was taken captive by the Comanches, and she spent most of the rest of her life living with them. It was she who later became the mother of Quanah Parker. When David learned about this, he and his adult son Tim decided to be part of a Parker family reunion at Fort Parker State Park in Texas. There were over 100 Parkers there, all descended from Elder John Parker. David believes he comes through a brother of Elder John, a James Parker, who is something of an enigma to the Elder John side of the family. It's believed that David's ancestor James stayed behind in Indiana when John departed for Texas in 1833. Cynthia Ann Parker was a daughter of Elder John, and so the annual reunion is alternately hosted by the Texas branch and the Comanche branch, based in Oklahoma. David is now waiting for his DNA test results to come in to confirm his connection to this very interesting and involved family. Mary Amelia has been found. She was a young widow who came to America from Ireland with 3 kids in tow before she was hired on as a housekeeper at the White House. No, not that White House. The other one that belonged to the Confederacy. She was a confidant to First Lady Varina Davis, wife of President Jefferson Davis. Considered something of an enigma, a photograph of her, the only one ever known, was recently turned over to the Civil War Museum, which is located next to that other White House in Richmond, Virginia. Mary was visiting friends from her home in Baltimore when she was stranded by Virginia's seceding from the Union in 1861. Wanting to get back to her children, she appealed to a Roman Catholic bishop who approached Varina Davis. Davis instead convinced Mary to take the position of housekeeper to the First Family of the South. After her service there ended, she returned to Baltimore, where she died in 1907. Read more about this and see the newfound picture contributed by a descendant at extremegenes.com. And coming up next, he's a curator at a living 1830s museum who's about to destroy some of the facts about life in the 19th century that you've heard all your life. Tom Kelleher joins us in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes Family History Radio, America's Family History Show. Did you know that genetic genealogy can help you break through brick walls and find relatives you didn't know existed? Hi, it's Fisher. Jim used the Family Finder test from Family Tree DNA to find his father's half-sisters.
Hi, this is Jim Oxford from Summerville, Georgia. My Family Tree DNA test led me to my father's half-sisters, my aunts, and my first cousins, and I feel like I've known them my whole life.
You too can use the Family Finder test to find relatives within 4 or 5 generations on both sides of the family. Family Tree DNA's Family Finder test is regularly just $99, but as an Extreme Genes listener, now is the perfect time to order because for a limited time, you can save $10. Just use the coupon code EXTREMEGENES at checkout. That's one word. What are you waiting for? Over 1 million people have had their DNA tested with great results with FamilyTreeDNA.com. And remember to use the coupon code EXTREMEGENES at checkout for a limited time $10 savings.
While we all love diving into the deep end of our gene pool, don't forget about capturing the histories of those who are still with us. Go to Storyworth.com to start your family's story today. Each week, Storyworth.com will email a question to people whose stories you wish to preserve. Questions like, tell us about the day you got engaged, or what do you remember about your grandmother? All they have to do is reply with a story, either by email or by telephone. That story is then forwarded to the family and securely stored in a private online storybook. It doesn't get any simpler. You can enroll up to 6 storytellers for, get this, just $49 a year. You'll get a free 1-month trial, and for a limited time, Extreme Genes listeners get an additional 10% discount at Storyworth.com/ExtremeGenes. That's Storyworth.com/ExtremeGenes. Is your family story worth 13 cents a day? Sign up now at Storyworth.com/ExtremeGenes. Simple, secure, effective. Your story is worth telling.
You know, there's nothing more exciting than walking where your ancestors walked and seeing what they saw. Hi, it's Fisher here, and I know I've done it. It's life-changing. And right now, Alan McKay Tours is teaming up with Ancestry Tours for a Great Britain Ancestry Tour. It's happening October 16th through 24th. Fly from your home city to London on October 16th, arriving the morning of the 17th, when you'll enjoy your first day touring England's ancient capital. If you choose, 3 days out of the trip are dedicated to family history research with professional experts in London, Manchester, Liverpool, and Edinburgh, Scotland. You might have your own agenda in these places, but what an opportunity. Hurry, space is limited for this exciting Great Britain Ancestry Tour, October 16th through 24th. Call Alan McKay Tours today at 801-917-1131. That's 801-917-1131. Prices vary depending upon city of departure. Call now and get a $50 per person Extreme Jeans discount. Here's the opportunity you've been waiting for.
And welcome back to Extreme Genes, Family History Radio, extremegenes.com. It is Fisher here, the radio root sleuth, with a special guest from Massachusetts at Old Sturbridge Village, Tom Kelleher. He's the curator there. Hi, Tom. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Tell me about Old Sturbridge Village. What do you do there?
Old Sturbridge Village is a living history museum, an outdoor museum. We're the biggest one in the Northeast. We opened in 1946. We're basically a lot of buildings that have been moved from all 6 of the New England states, and we basically recreate everyday life in the early years of the American Republic.
Wow, it sounds a lot like a northeastern version of Williamsburg.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of genre. We're the same kind of thing.
Well, I was looking at this list you put together and you published in an Old Sturbridge publication, talking about some of the common myths that people have about back in the old days. And I couldn't disagree with you on any of them. And I thought maybe we'd go through and talk about some of this stuff.
Actually, I put the list together, the top 10 myths, as a memo to my staff, and our newsletter editor decided that she didn't want to devote that much text in one issue. So,
all right. So what was the first one was that people in the past were a lot shorter.
You always hear that when you're in a living history environment. The thing about these myths, these kind of things that your first grade teacher told you, I know my first grade teacher told me, usually we historians can ascribe them to one of two things. Either conflation, which is basically taking all the past and lumping it into one past, instead of saying, 1,000 years ago this happened and then 10 years ago that happened. The other thing it's kind of like every February we see Washington and Lincoln selling Toyotas, and we figure they knew each other.
Right.
When, of course, Washington was dead 10 years before Lincoln was born.
Right.
But it seems that, they're always palling around on the TV commercial. Anyway, the other thing is called the myth of universality. Basically, take something that is more or less true and make it everybody always these absolutes.
Right.
But anyway, in early America, compared to today, most people, on average, were a little bit shorter. But early Americans weren't the race of dwarfs running around, singing "We Represent the Lollipop Guild" or something like that. I mean, if you or I don't know how tall you are because of this radio.
6 feet.
But if you or I went back in the past, there would be people taller than us, there'd be people shorter than us, and we wouldn't be this race of giants towering over our predecessors. Whether you're Abe Lincoln or Clint Eastwood, 6'4", that's tall. That's tall then, that's tall now.
That's true.
At 5 foot tall, Martha Washington, Paula Abdul, the Olsen twins, that's short. That are now.
Okay.
Nowadays, most of us for the past 50, 60 years have had better childhood nutrition and are a little taller. And in fact, a couple hundred years ago, Europeans coming to America noticed Americans were a little taller than they were on average because Americans had better nutrition than most Europeans.
Well, that's a good point. Well, this kind of leads to the second point you made, that everybody died young back then.
Well, that's the thing. That's the universality, the everybody. Benjamin Disraeli, who was Queen Victoria's favorite prime minister, is quoted as saying there are 3 kinds of deceit. There's lies, there's damned lies, and there's statistics.
Right, a great quote.
And exactly. I've always loved that one. But the point is, at birth, the life expectancy for most of the 19th century and before in America was about mid-40s. But if you made it to your 20s, you would probably live to be your late 60s. And if you made it to 50, you could probably live into your mid-70s. So it's the average. I mean, 3,000 years ago, In the book of Psalms, they wrote, the days of our years are 70. That's 70, or 80 for those that are strong. So it's not like, oh, everybody's going to die at 20. The difference, I think, is that nowadays death is something, to most of us, that happens to old people.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly there's tragedies, but in the past, death was something that happened to people.
Right, at any time, right?
You could easily die as an infant from things we get shots for now that we don't die of in this country, like measles, diphtheria, pertussis, all the stuff that most Americans never even think of because they give us a shot when we're babies and kids, and we don't get these terrible diseases that killed people then.
Right.
And Americans don't tend to die of things that they died of then, like cholera, typhus, typhoid fever. These are things in our history books. Sadly, other places of the world still are prone to them.
All right, next thing on your list. People back then never wasted anything.
Oh, this is one of my favorite things. I mean, we project as, oh, they lived in a simpler time. Well, first off, there are just a lot fewer people, and they're a lot poorer than we are today, by and large. So they just had less stuff to waste. But you got to remember, these people polluted their environment with as much abandon, and more abandon than most Americans do now. They just had less means and a lot less people to do it with. The population of the United States in 1830 was 13 million. So they just had a lot less people to despoil the land, and they had a lot less wealth to despoil the land. I mean, packaging now from all the stuff we buy and consume. But these were also the same people that were going out and burning whole forests just to clear the land.
That's right.
Or to make potash from the ashes of the trees they burned. So these weren't a bunch of environmentalists singing Kumbaya. They basically just didn't have the means to do the mess.
All right, next on your list is people were a lot thinner. Now, that makes sense to me because we know we have an obesity crisis going on in this country, but what's your thought on this?
Well, more than 2 out of 3 of us today are overweight or obese in America. And certainly in early America, most people compared to today were a lot leaner. But there were certainly heavy people back then as now. That's one of those universal things. On average, yes, we're a lot heavier, we're a lot bigger people today than we used to be on average. But there were certainly large people back then. The problem is people will look at things like clothes that have survived for 200 years and say, look how tiny they were. Well, remember, they were a poorer people, so clothes tended to get handed down and reused. What are the clothes that can't be taken in or reused are clothes that are already for the smaller people that you just can't let anybody else wear. So that tends to be what gets thrown in a trunk and survive. In the collections of Old Sturbridge Village, we have a lot of small clothes. We also have clothes that are for quite heavy people that, for whatever reason, these clothes have survived. But so on average, it's true, but as a universal, it's not true.
We're talking to Tom Kelleher. He's the curator for Old Sturbridge Village in Massachusetts, talking about some of his favorite myths from the past. All right, next on the list, Tom, women tending to fires, wearing dresses, tended to burn to death.
Oh, I love that one. There's an old saying that if dog bites man, that's not news. Man bites dog, that's news.
Right.
If you looked at old newspapers, every once in a great while, you'll see a newspaper article that talks about some poor person, sometimes a child, sometimes a woman, falling into a fire and burning to death, or getting burns and then later succumbing to the injuries. And so that's news. It was so rare that it was remarked on, but it didn't really happen very much. And usually, if you look at the articles, it's usually a cautionary tale, because usually if it's an adult, the adult was inebriated, and basically they say, look at this poor inebriate drunkard who couldn't control herself and fell into a fire, and see why you shouldn't do this. But no, it's a very, very rare thing that happened. I mean, certainly sometimes the edges of skirts got singed, but people erupting into flame all the time, that just didn't happen.
I think it might have been more common with the spirit gas lamps back then. Where
Well, certainly in the mid-1800s, there was a lamp fuel called, there was burning fluid and camphene, which are both very volatile, almost explosive. And these sort of substitute lamp fuels, trying to make up for an increasing shortage of whale oil by the mid-1800s, were dangerous. And sometimes these lamps did sort of blow up or erupt into flame. So, yeah, that contributes to it.
Yes. Okay. That's the entire list that I have, but you say there are more things.
There are more things to come. Well, one thing is that there's a common myth we hear a lot in living history museums that houses in the past didn't have closets because they were trying to avoid a closet tax, and that people had few windows in old houses to avoid a window tax. Well, the thing is, here in America, there were no taxes on those things. Taxes were on the assessed value of real estate. Now, in Europe, in some European countries, England, Spain, they did do things like tax windows, but that just wasn't done, certainly where I come from in New England. The other thing about the closets, well, people had a lot fewer clothes. They tended to keep their clothes in chests of drawers and other pieces of furniture. They didn't have coat hangers like we do now, clothes hangers. That's not how they store their clothes. So the idea of a closet, they had the word closet, but their word closet, if you look at early dictionaries, it was basically a small room, which is what our closets are now. We just keep clothes in those small rooms. They didn't have that many clothes. So if you look at old houses, sometimes they're what they call cupboards for storing things in, but there was no tax on closets. That's just some creative myth that people have come up with.
All right, what else is on your list?
One of the things you hear a lot is back in the past, people burned down the houses to get the nails. This is one of those things that there is a basis in fact for. It was very uncommon, it was very rare, but there is a basis in fact. Of course, it's ridiculous to burn down a house if you just want the nails. But if you think about it today, it's ridiculous to wreck an apartment building to rip out the copper wires or the copper pipes. But on abandoned properties, on properties where somebody can come in the dead of night and steal the copper pipes or the copper wires out of somebody's house for the scrap value, it's a form of theft that certainly goes on. And that's where that nail myth comes in. Back in the 1640s in colonial Virginia, the House of Burgesses, what became the Virginia legislature, did pass a law in 1644 against burning down unoccupied buildings to recover the nails from the ashes. But that wasn't people burning down their own houses to get the nails. You have a society in 1640s Virginia where you've got a lot of men, not a lot of women, and a real land hunger. So people were starting to move west. And if somebody is not in a building at the time, it might catch fire accidentally, wink, 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 nudge, nudge, some night. And then somebody can come by and get a few cents a pound for the scrap iron and the nails, or even straighten out the nails and resell them. But nobody's burning down their own houses to get the nails. So what the House of Burgesses did to prevent this crime, akin to stripping out pipes or wires from apartment houses today, is they set a law saying if you have a building you don't want, just tell us. We'll send an assessor out, and we'll pay you what the nails are worth. Of course, nobody took them up on it because that's not how it was working, but that stopped a lot of this arson that was going on at the time.
That's funny. Amazing. Tom Kelleher, he's the curator of Old Sturbridge Village in Massachusetts. Thanks so much for your time.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Scott. It's been nice talking with you.
And coming up next, we go from Massachusetts to Minnesota for a continuation of our Day of Lists. This time, it's a list of 5 fun facts about 19th century photography, and you're going to be amazed. Erica Vetch joins us next on Extreme Genes, Family History Radio, and ExtremeGenes.com.
Hello, Extreme Genes listeners. I'm Larry Gelwicks, the getaway guru and host of the Travel Show radio broadcast with the hottest travel deals on the planet. And now you can travel more and pay less by joining me on our Travel Show podcast. Cruises, tours, resort hotels, airline tickets, stay close to home, or travel the world. I'll show you how to travel more and pay less. Go online to ColumbusVacations.com. That's ColumbusVacations.com. Click on radio and then click on podcast. It's really that simple. ColumbusVacations.com, radio and podcast for the hottest travel deals on the planet.
Got a brick wall in your family tree? Don't know how to break through it? Get professional help from Heritage Consulting Genealogy Research Services. Speak directly with an experienced genealogical researcher, not a salesperson, by calling toll-free 1-877-537-2000. When you call, ask how you could win a free 1-hour consultation with an expert genealogist. Heritage Consulting Genealogy Research Services, with over 35 years of research experience. Visit heritageconsulting.com. Did you know your family's memories are being destroyed a little at a time every day. It's true. Old home movies, slides, photos, and audio recordings fade over time. The longer you delay the digitizing of these priceless artifacts, the more likely it is they'll be gone one day. That's why you need to call the Multimedia Center.
I brought in VHS videotape and had them transferred to DVD.
The Multimedia Center, 2870 East, 3300 South, Salt Lake City. Open Monday through Friday, 10 to 6. Call 801-483-1717 or go to transferduplication.com.
Welcome back to Extreme Genes, Family History Radio, extremegenes.com, America's Family History Show. It is Fisher here with my guest, Erica Vetch. And Erica, we've been doing some lists today. We just talked about some old myths from back in the day that people believe are true but aren't quite true. And you have a great list that you posted on Kelly Gwynn's blog not long ago that I really liked. 5 fun facts about photography. Where did you get your interest in photography, Erica?
Actually, I was doing research for a novel that I wrote that was published a couple years ago. It's called A Bride's Portrait of Dodge City, Kansas. So I needed to learn about old-time photography.
And so you dug in and you found out some things that were unique and different. Well, let's go through the list and start with this. The sour expressions that people always have when we see them. Now, I just got a whole batch of daguerreotypes 5 or 6 weeks ago from the estate of a distant cousin. And they do. They all have that sour look on their face. What is the cause of that?
Well, it actually comes as a result of the time that it took to expose the negative. If a person smiled or if they moved at all, the picture would come out blurry. It's hard for a person to hold the same expression for even up to 20 minutes.
Oh, that long?
Exposure time.
Wow. Well, you'll often see a hand is kind of blurry. It's like they just have to move at some point.
Yeah.
What about the eyes? I don't know if do we see many blurry eyes on those things as a result of people just, they sneak a glance at some point?
Or they blink, which can be a problem. But early photographers also became quite adept at touching up photos, and it was not unusual for them to paint the eyes back on if someone blinked during the exposure.
Wow. So it's much art as it was science.
Pretty much.
All right. That brought up the next point. You mentioned braces, and I hadn't really thought much about this. I'm thinking, braces, are they wearing something in their mouth? No, it was around their neck.
Yeah, neck and head restraints to keep your head perfectly still. And if you've ever seen one, it looks torturous. For small children, often there's a parent's hand. Sometimes if you look close, you can see there's a hand up behind where they're holding the baby's head still.
I've seen those, and also where they look like a ghost or something from behind them because they're wearing a blanket or something over themselves. You can see the shape of their head and their shoulders as they hold the child in place.
Yep. It's hard to get a child to hold still for a photo now.
Oh, absolutely. That had to be almost impossible, and you would think with the time involved and the expense of a daguerreotype, they were like $5, which was what a white-collar worker would earn in a week. They had to be a real adventure.
Yes, and with daguerreotypes, it's a one-shot deal. They are not negatives that you can create prints from, so all the precautions were taken to make it come out right the first time.
Absolutely. So they had braces on their necks and moms and dads holding the kids in place and asking them not to move. Not really a likely thing.
Not so much.
All right. The next thing you had on the list was, to me, really heartbreaking and sad, and that is a lot of dead people were photographed.
Yeah, either for sensational reasons or sentimental reasons. The famous dead were often photographed, and you'll see victims in gunfights. Or I was just recently in Northfield, Minnesota, at the site of the Northfield raid and the demise of the Jesse James Cole Younger gang, and they photographed all of the victims, and they were posed and posted in the newspaper. But the saddest part was often if an infant or child passed away, they would photograph the infant because it was their only way of remembering the child. Often there hadn't been time to photograph the child when they were alive, so they would photograph after the child had passed away. And again, often the photographers would touch up the portrait to make the child look alive. They would paint the eyes on as if they were open to paint a little bit of a smile on the child's face. But yeah, you can find a lot of those photos.
So were those photos basically done to make it look as if the child had been photographed while living? Or was it to remember what the child looked like at the time of its burial?
More to make the child, to remember the child when they were alive. You'll see them posed with their siblings or often with their mother, not laid out in a casket.
Right, held in the arms of the parents.
Yes.
I remember one that I saw some time back that was just amazing to me. It was an entire family next to an old man in a coffin, and they propped the coffin up and then took pictures with him that way.
Yeah, that's not something that you see too much these days. But again, sometimes that was the only photograph that they would ever have of the person.
Right, and those are the things that survive, and boy, are they interesting to look at. Wow. All right, the next thing on your list was poisoning. Tell us about what went on with the photographers and in the process.
Well, if you tried to create a photograph it's called the collodion process, it's about 16 different steps just to prepare the negative.
Wow.
To take the photograph. So you have things like ether and ethyl alcohol and iodine and bromide, and you're mixing chemicals. You're as much a chemist as you are a photographer. And over a period of time, these metals and chemicals could build up in your system and slowly poison you. Often photographers had to take a sabbatical from their work in order to cleanse their systems out. Also, there was the danger of burning down your photography studio or causing an explosion. And all of these chemicals needed to be transported because most early photographers were not stationary. They traveled around to where the people were. So you're carrying this floating lab with you. You know, everything that you're doing to run your own business and the side benefit of possibly poisoning yourself.
Did a lot of people die then from this poisoning, or were they just permanently ill?
You know, eventually they could take a sabbatical and mitigate a lot of the circumstances.
Right.
Early on, people did perish because they didn't really understand what was happening. It was a known hazard, and photographers just sort of took that on, said, well, I'll be careful, but there were long-term effects that you would have from being a professional photographer at that time.
Well, I would think, though, it's like anything else. If the money's right, people will take an awful lot of risks. And there was good money.
Exactly. And there's also the artistic factor and the novelty factor. You were doing something that not a lot of people could do, and you did what you did to make the money so that you could do what you wanted to do, experimenting with different exposures and light and just trying new things. You were really cutting edge as an early photographer.
Absolutely. What other things have you discovered along the way that made you go,
The last thing on the list was that risk of explosion with the potassium chloride and aluminum that they were using to make flash powder.
Did that happen a lot?
Yes, actually. You could explode these powders if you just spilled some on the floor and stepped on it.
Whoa.
You'd create a small explosion, but a lot of photographers did, they would burn down their studio through the use of these chemicals, or you could burn your skin with them or cause visual damage just through the flash exposure.
So did people get blinded a lot from that?
They could. That was a very real danger.
Huh.
One of the things that I found interesting was that the County of Kansas, Abilene, Newton, Dodge City in particular, had a lot of photography studios because nobody wanted to get his picture taken more than a cow hand just off the trail. They wanted their picture taken in their full cowboy regalia with all of their weapons and occasionally their horse pulled into the studio and taken a photo.
Really?
Yep. And often they'd take pictures with their trail buddies, and they wanted to send these pictures home to their mother, and they're just bristling with guns and knives and chaps and hats, and they were very, very proud.
And a lot of these folks did come from the East. I mean, I remember that Sundance Kid was from the Philadelphia area, so that's not really surprising.
So, in fact, the photograph that inspired the novel that I wrote is of a cowboy who brought his horse into the studio to have his picture taken because the horse was his best trail hand.
Well, we've come a long way to digital cameras now, Erica, and thank you so much. Your fun facts about photography, they're fascinating.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure.
And coming up next, Tom Perry, our preservation authority from tmcplace.com, with more advice on preserving audio on Extreme Genes, Family History Radio, and extremegenes.com.
Did you know that genetic genealogy can help you break through brick walls and find relatives you didn't know existed? Hi, it's Fisher. Jim used the Family Finder test from Family Tree DNA to find his father's half-sisters.
Hi, this is Jim Oxford from Somerville, Georgia. My family tree DNA test led me to my father's half-sisters, my aunts, and my first cousins, and I feel like I've known them my whole life.
You too can use the Family Finder test to find relatives within 4 or 5 generations on both sides of the family. Family Tree DNA's Family Finder test is regularly just $99, but as an Extreme Genes listener, now is the perfect time to order because for a limited time, you can save $10. Just use the coupon code EXTREMEGENES at checkout. That's one word. What are you waiting for? Over 1 million people have had their DNA tested with great results with FamilyTreeDNA.com. And remember to use the coupon code EXTREMEGENES at checkout for a limited time $10 savings.
While we all love diving into the deep end of our gene pool, don't forget about capturing the histories of those who are still with us. Go to Storyworth.com to start your family's story today. Each week, Storyworth.com will email a question to people whose stories you wish to preserve. Questions like, tell us about the day you got engaged, or what do you remember about your grandmother? All they have to do is reply with a story, either by email or by telephone. That story is then forwarded to the family and securely stored in a private online storybook. It doesn't get any simpler. You can enroll up to 6 storytellers for, get this, just $49 a year. You'll get a free 1-month trial, and for a limited time, Extreme Genes listeners get an additional 10% discount at Storyworth.com/ExtremeGenes. That's Storyworth.com/ExtremeGenes. Is your family story worth 13 cents a day? Sign up now at Storyworth.com/ExtremeGenes. Simple, secure, effective. Your story is worth telling.
You know, there's nothing more exciting than walking where your ancestors walked and seeing what they saw. Hi, it's Fisher here, and I know I've done it. It's life-changing. And right now, Alan McKay Tours is teaming up with Ancestry Tours for a Great Britain Ancestry Tour. It's happening October 16th through 24th. Fly from your home city to London on October 16th, arriving the morning of the 17th, when you'll enjoy your first day touring England's ancient capital. If you choose, 3 days out of the trip are dedicated to family history research with professional experts in London, Manchester, Liverpool, and Edinburgh, Scotland. You might have your own agenda in these places, but what an opportunity. Hurry, space is limited for this exciting Great Britain Ancestry Tour, October 16th through 24th. Call Alan McKay Tours today at 801-917-1131. That's 801-917-1131. Prices vary depending upon city of departure. Call now and get a $50 per person Extreme Genes discount. Here's the opportunity you've been waiting for.
Hey, welcome back. It's Extreme Genes, Family History Radio, America's Family History Show. Fisher here with Tom Perry from TMCplace.com. He is our preservation authority. We've been talking about audio the last week or so, and last week we were talking about the importance of having headphones when you record interviews with grandma and grandpa, or even record a wedding or whatever it may be. What are we on to this week, Tom?
Okay, we're going to talk about microphones, and we've got a couple of letters since we were on last time that they say, where's a good place you can get some basic skills? One of the easiest no-brainer ways is go to Boy Scouts of America website and look under Photo Merit Badge. And even though it's a photo merit badge, it has basic framing techniques, has basic audio techniques, and just go click on all the different links. If you're more into audio, go and click on those links and you'll learn a lot.
I would have never thought of that. That's a great idea.
Oh, it's awesome. And if you're young enough, get a merit badge out of it. One thing we talked about, don't just assume that audio can be fixed in the mix. It can't. People ask, what's a good audio editing program? One of the best ones that we've mentioned before on the show that you've used yourself is Pro Tools.
Yep.
It's an awesome program. It's not very expensive, and it's amazing with all the apps you can hook onto it and all the different kind of add-ons that you can do to make Pro Tools do amazing things. So if you want to do it yourself, you're a do-it-yourself type person, get Pro Tools. It's great. Now, once you have the good equipment, another thing you need to worry about is your room. Do you have a live room or a dead room?
Right. And this is something everybody deals with. It's very difficult to deaden a room.
Oh, it is.
And that's why certain cloths come into play, certain devices that you can put on the wall to take the sound out from bouncing all over the place.
Right. That's the biggest problem. Like you mentioned, most studios you go into, they're not just four walls, a roof, and a ceiling. They're all square because the sound is going to bounce off of them. You're going to hear echoes. It's going to drive everybody nuts. And if you don't have a big budget, you can do things as simple as get those big laundry bags that are kind of made out of mesh and fill them full of loose fill and hang those around in the room. Hang up some burlap bags, anything that's going to absorb sound, the mats you put under your sleeping bag, anything like that to kind of unsquare the room, so to speak.
You know, this really goes back to what you were talking about last week, Tom. Far more important to get it right while you're recording than to try to fix it later.
Exactly. I remember in my younger days when I did a lot of video, they go, oh, don't worry about the audio. We'll fix it in the mix. It never happens. You need to get your audio right from the beginning. The preservation is going to be so much better if you have something that's enjoyable, that everybody wants to listen to, that's going to feel comfortable. Like last week we talked about where they had the two people watching the same movie, but yet they had different audio tracks. One group loved it, the other one didn't love it, and the only thing that changed was that music. So that's so important. And as we talked last week, headphones, 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 headphones. When you're interviewing somebody, whether it's with a little pocket recorder or a camcorder, whatever, put on a set of headphones because that will tell you before you start, hey, there's some weird sounds in here. Oh, let's turn off the air conditioner for a few minutes. Oh, let's turn off that fluorescent light up above that's buzzing, the refrigerator, because your brain is going to tune those things out because it doesn't want to hear it, but the camcorder is going to hear them.
I actually had a studio that was built for me by some engineers. The problem was there was a computer in there with a bad fan. And because of the bad fan, everything they did was no good until we could replace that computer with the fan.
$25 fan.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, it's crazy. And you would never notice that if you don't have the headphones on and listen to that. So what you want to do, a day or two before, go and set up your equipment, put on that set of headphones, and listen to the room.
And preferably find a small room to do that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You want too big of a room. You want to make it sound like a concert hall.
Yeah.
So get a small room, hang up some sleeping bags, some blankets, different things like that that's going to help deaden the sound. But sit and listen to your headphones and turn them on full volume with nobody in there. And just do what we call listen to the room. And if there's some sounds in that room that you don't want to listen to, like the fluorescent lights humming, halogen lights can even be making bubbly sounds, your refrigerator, something in the wall, you might find out you have mice in your wall.
Wow, that would be awful.
That would be awful. But at least you're going to know it ahead of time. You're not going to hear the scratch, scratch, scratch.
All right.
So that's a great thing. Let's talk about some different kinds of microphones in the next segment.
All right, coming up in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes, Family History Radio and ExtremeGenes.com.
When was the last time you heard your grandmother's voice or saw your family enjoying life back in the 1950s or 60s? If the reason is you haven't known what to do with your old recordings, videos, and films, here's your answer. The Multimedia Center in Salt Lake City.
We brought in a video project to the Multimedia Center, and overnight they duplicated it to DVD so we could meet our deadline.
The Multimedia Center, 2870 East, 3300 South, Salt Lake City. Open Monday through Friday, 10 to 6. Call 801-483-1717 or go to transferduplication.com.
Hello, Extreme Genes listeners. I'm Larry Gelwicks, the getaway guru and host of the Travel Show radio broadcast with the hottest travel deals on the planet. And now you can travel more and pay less by joining me on our Travel Show podcast. Cruises, tours, resort hotels, airline tickets, stay close to home, or travel the world. I'll show you how to travel more and pay less. Go online to ColumbusVacations.com. That's ColumbusVacations.com. Click on radio and then click on podcast. It's really that simple. ColumbusVacations.com, radio and podcast for the hottest travel deals on the planet.
Welcome back to Extreme Genes, America's family history show. Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, with Tom Perry from TMCplace.com. He is our preservation authority. Talking audio again this week. And Tom, let's talk about microphones a little bit.
Okay. Microphones are a great thing to talk about. It's not only important to have a good microphone to go with your headphones, the placement is also important. So first thing, when you start looking for a good microphone, I'd suggest going on the internet and just do some searches on microphones and learn the basics of whether you're looking at a condenser microphone, a ribbon microphone, whatever kind of microphone you're interested in. You can see, oh, this is what's going to best suit me. When you're ready to buy, we've talked about them on the radio before, go to bandh.com. B as in boy, then the word and, A-N-D, and then H as in Harry. debunking.com, and they have all kinds of audio equipment that's available. They're hypercardioid, there's lavaliers, omnidirectional, directional, PZMs, and shotguns. So like if you're going to be getting sports and things like that, your kids' games, usually use a shotgun because they're very, very directional. You kind of aim them at where you want them to be. If you see people at the side of a football game where they have what looks like a half of a dome with a microphone in it, those are very directional, but they take in all the sound. They want to get the crowd sound. Whatever it's aimed at, they're going to get all kinds of sound from things like that, which on most situations, you don't want all that kind of sound. You want something that's very specific. A lavalier is what you'll usually see on the news programs when they're sitting there and they have a little teeny microphone clipped onto their lapel.
Right.
That's a lavalier, and they're usually very, very directional. So they only get the talent that's talking into it. The person sitting next to them, they won't get that.
And that's, by the way, what you see your weathermen usually using on the evening news.
Exactly, because you only want them. You don't want their feet walking across the floor. You don't want other people that are in the studio getting ready for their segment talking. You want something that's very, very directional. An omnidirectional means basically it gets everything. It gets everything. In most churches, when you're looking at the podium, you'll see a mic that has kind of a screen on the top of it and a screen on the side. So that's usually a directional microphone. Usually it's called a cardioid or a supercardioid because it only wants you, but then there's going to be speakers up in the ceiling that are going to be letting everybody else listen, and some of that sound is going to come back to the microphone. And so the mesh part on the side of the microphone and the south end of the microphone is going to take those sounds, reverse them, and cancel each other out so the indirect sounds won't be recorded to the microphone. But if you're getting a whole bunch of people around a boardroom table, like all your family and friends, and talking about something, if you have a directional, some people are going to sound good, some people are going to sound bad. So what we recommend is something like what they call a PZM, a pressure zone microphone. And what that does, you set it on the desktop, and it turns the entire top of the desk into a microphone.
So are these mics that you could go out and actually rent as opposed to buying? Because I'm sure some of them are very expensive.
Oh, absolutely. That's what's so nice about renting. Look in the yellow pages under Pro Audio, and I guarantee in almost any place you're going to find somebody that rents. If you're in a really small area, just look outside, and there'll be somebody there that will ship them. Like we have people in Florida that have us ship them, scanners. We have people in Washington State that want us to ship them scanners. And the same thing with microphones. And a lot of the good companies, they won't count the travel time as part of your rental. So if you have a 3-day family reunion, it'll be worth every cent you pay to have that done. So basically, you want to make sure you get the right kind of microphone. If you're just interviewing grandma and grandpa and they don't want to be mic'd separately, what you want to do is get something like a good cardioid microphone, which basically has a pattern that looks like a heart. That's where the cardioid comes from. And aim it at grandma and grandpa, and it'll be able to pick both of them up. Same thing with a shotgun. A shotgun mic's usually always good to get 2, maybe 3 people. When you start getting crowds, you're going to want to get, more of an omnidirectional microphone. If the people are sitting around like in a half circle, you're going to need more of an omnidirectional microphone. Or you're going to want to get a PZM, like I told you, if they're sitting around a table, like a kitchen table talking, because it turns the entire top of the table into a microphone. And just remember, hang up carpet on the walls, hang up sleeping bags, anything you can to kind of retard some of the noises that are going to be reflecting off the walls and windows.
All right, there you go. He's Tom Perry. He's our preservation authority. If you have a question for Tom, you can always ask Tom at tmcplace.com. Wow, today's show has gone fast. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can catch the podcast starting tomorrow on iTunes and iHeartRadio, as well as extremegenes.com. We'll catch you again next week. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.